thing I do want to amplify from what Mike said that may not seem that important right now because you're just starting your career. Keep track of your career. Keep track of what projects you worked on. Keep track of what articles you may have written or contributed to. Keep track of what speaking engagements you have because one of these days, hopefully, you'll be interested in, for example, applying to the American College of Healthcare Architects, ACHA, or becoming a fellow in ACHA, or becoming a fellow in the AIA. And not having to resurrect that information will save you lots of time and lots of aggravation. So keep track of yourself throughout your career. So I'm going to start with day one. Taft recommended between, was it Thanksgiving and Valentine's Day, to start searching. If you can go to the next slide, Tammy. So this is how you set up the rest of your career. This is your first job, first major job after graduation or internship, which is equally important. So you got to do some homework first. So research the organizations that you're applying to. And if you're fortunate enough to have an interview, dig into who is going to be on the interview panel with you. Understand as much as you can about what their career is and what the firm is like. Also, be ready to practice, and I've got a few of these in the presentation in a few minutes. Come up with some questions that you would like to ask, not only about, well, what are your benefits, but more about the firm, more about the kind of work they've done. Also, be ready to tell stories. I think, Mike, you mentioned that earlier. You want to be able to explain what your interests are, briefly explain the approach you took to some of the projects in your portfolio. It would help to give some description of why you're interested in the firm you're interviewing with and why you're interested in healthcare architecture. But keep those stories brief. There's a reason that commercials are 30 seconds long. It's because that is a little bit over our attention span. So make sure you're clear, you're concise, and brevity is your friend. And then dress professionally. Don't dress like I am today. I am not dressed for an interview. I would say dress like Mike, dress like Espy. The only way you can go wrong is if you wear a tuxedo or a ball gown. So take it one notch below that. You always want to try to match up with the people that you're interviewing with or step it up a notch. But no tuxes, no ball gowns. Next. Even though, as Espy mentioned, you may get yourself an interview set up through a network, through a friend, through a family member, still apply through the firm's formal channels because what you don't want to do is get lost in the milieu of all the other folks who are applying. So it's great if you know someone and you have an interview with that person, send them your resume, send them a link to your portfolio, but also make sure you go through the official HR channels. That way you're being tracked in the system. We are now, given the situation over the past 5 years or so, doing lots of virtual interviews. And that is really a good opportunity for us as potential employers to get to know the individual. Chances are, if you're fortunate enough through the process, you'll have a phone call, brief interview, and then maybe a virtual interview if you're not in the same city as the firm, and then potentially a face-to-face interview. But each of those steps are equally important. And again, I said this a few minutes ago, make sure you know as much as you can about the person you're in, not in a stalky way, but just understanding a little bit about their career path, and the kind of projects that they and their firm are doing. Next, thank you. Get there ahead of time. Even if it's a virtual interview, join it 5 minutes before the time frame because stuff happens. Technology isn't always our friend. You want to make sure that you've got um, a blurred background or a pleasing background behind you if it's a virtual interview. If you are driving to the interview and again, stuff happens and you're going to be late, make sure you pull off to the side of the road and let that person that you're meeting with know that you're going to be a few minutes late. Things happen. But Always try to be early. Show a degree of confidence when you're meeting uh, with the individuals who are doing the interview. Be a good communicator. 75% of communicating is listening. As I mentioned before, brevity is going to be your friend. It's easy to meander when answering a question. But I learned this the hard way when I was doing a courthouse, uh, and the common pleas judge was really asking me a series of questions. This was a long time ago. He said, Tim, when I ask you a question, just give me the answer. Don't tell me why you're going to give me the answer you're going to give me 5 minutes later. So answer the question and be prepared to ask questions yourself and be your professional self. When I first wrote that, I just said, be yourself. But then I remembered a time where somebody called me Bud in an interview. I think I've been called pal and bro a few times. That's not a good way to create a good impression. So be your best professional self, but be yourself, right? It's very obvious to those of us who have done a lot of these interviews when someone is acting out of character. So just be yourself, but your best professional self. Summarize your resume. One thing that I think SB or Tav may have mentioned, it's good to have consistency in the format of your resume and your portfolio and any letter that you might send. So there's, all of that is to be designed as well. If you have had previous work experience, explain that. That's always important, regardless of what it is, quite frankly, even if it's not necessarily directly related with architecture. And then when you're going through your portfolio, white space is good. Don't overload it visually. Actually, the fewer words in a portfolio, the better. And this advice is actually not only for interviewing for a job, but when you're interviewing for a project later on in your career, hit them with your best project. Then finish with your second best project. But make sure all the projects between your first and your last are good. But you want to get their attention, hold their attention, then grab their attention again. Also, I think a lot of architectural programs have some team projects. We like to hear that because we all work in teams. None of us works on projects by ourselves. Be ready to explain how you divided up responsibilities with your team and what your specific responsibilities and contributions were. Next. Thank you. A few questions that I would recommend you keeping track of. What are the skills necessary for the role that you're interviewing for? And then how do you align with some of those skills? Ask what the culture of the firm is. If the person interviewing you can't answer that, that's a bit of a red flag. But you want to show some interest in what the firm culture is and also how the firm is structured. Get a sense of what the diversity of project types are and project sizes and firm size and locations and what kind of expertise lies within the firm. And then it's always good to ask you, what are some of the things that your firm or your project teams are facing right now as challenges? Next. Be ready to share the history of a brief summary of your background. As Mike said, make sure that you've got some skills that align with what the role is looking for. If you've done your research, you'll have some understanding of why that firm and this opportunity is appealing. And it's hard when you're in school and right out of school thinking about long-term career goals. So maybe it should be share some short and midterm career goals. But if you have those long-term career goals, make them heard. It's your career. You own it. We don't. But we can help you down that path to achieve your short, mid, and long-term career goals. Maintain eye contact, even if it's a virtual interview. Look at the camera. That's very important as a communication tool. Again, 75% is listening. I'm making some of this up. Maybe 20% is talking and 5% is observing body language. You might want to Google that. I don't think I had the percentages right. Posture is important. Smiling is important. And avoid any kind of nervous gestures that you may have. One of them is, and this is a recommendation as well, rehearse some of what you're going to say. Try to eliminate filler words. Filler words can lead the person who is listening to you to diminish the confidence in what you have to say. And I'm going to borrow from a friend of mine in Seattle because I am involved in some other mentorship programs and have been on a panel with him before. He said, "You're hired for the attitude, you're trained for the skills. So make sure you get your personality across in that interview." Follow up with a thank you note. Handwritten notes are great because who does that anymore? So it will be remembered. Email thank you notes are fine too. Just put some thought into it. After the interview, what do you think went well? If there are areas that you think were weaker than others, work on those between this interview and your next. And we're all busy. We know students are very busy. If you don't hear back right away, like the next day, that's okay. But don't let too much time go by before you do a follow-up. Thank you
Hey,
very much. Anybody like to add anything?
yes, Tim, I would like to add something. We had two wonderful questions that I think are right up your alley from what you have just described. Prince just asked a question, if you don't get the role, would it be helpful to ask for feedback or appropriate critique?
Absolutely. And sometimes that can be a little painful, but if the person who interviewing you is being open and honest, that is only going to help you next time around. That was a very good question, Prince.
And then Richard has a question. How do you prove your interest in healthcare through your portfolio since it's the first impression before an interview request, even though you do not have much healthcare projects for an internship applicant?
Put that in a cover letter with your portfolio or in the email that you send with your portfolio, because you're right. A lot of, I work with a lot of students at OSU Knowlton, and they don't really do a lot of healthcare work, but I come across a number of students who are very interested in healthcare for a variety of reasons, some of the reasons that some of you described earlier. So you can get that across in a cover letter and make sure you make it clear in an introductory call.
And Tim, I was going to follow up and say that uh, we've had a number of people on this call have great experiences, such as George and Tammy, and even Mike, when they talked about their lived experience, whether it with their own health or with family members. And so, if you have a write-up of something that happened in your life that was related to health that made you more interested in health, please provide that as well, because that will give the whoever's giving the interview even more of a sense of who you are as a person and some of the things that you desire to do in healthcare.
Yep, absolutely. And all of us like to work with people that are equal in our passion for healthcare. So if you get that passion across, that's going to go a long way in getting a second interview or maybe even, this kickoff to your career.
And can I insert here too that healthcare isn't just hospitals and doctors' offices. If you've had a project that involves some education space, or in school you've done something that's semi-industrial, we've got commercial kitchens, dining rooms. We have an EMS ambulance facility that builds ambulances. So the gamut of what institutes healthcare or constitutes healthcare is a whole lot wider than just beds and ORs.